Hey everybody, how's it going? Okay. Hey, guess what? I'm Chris Charbonneau. I'm the associate publisher for FishTalk magazine. Thanks for joining us. It's Thursday, 5 o'clock, and our little sign says Fish Talk Live. Something's different. Something's different, and I'm going to tell you what it is here in a moment. But I did want to thank you for joining. Sorry for talking for almost 2 minutes without the mic on. My bad. Anyway, let's continue on. The first thing I need to do right now then is to actually thank our sponsors. So Riverside Marine and Geico are making this episode possible. The folks at Riverside Marine are fantastic. They've been supporters of Fish Talk since the beginning. And, every time I talk about Riverside with someone, I always hear about how cool their customer service is. The Bumgarner family, it's a family business, and their staff is incredible. And I think they have one of the best reputations out there. So if you're looking for a fish boat, you need to give Riverside a call. Also, Geico. Geico has also been a strong supporter of Fish Talk since the beginning. I love their commercials. I love the little gecko. So if you get a chance and you're looking for insurance, check out Geico. Now on to our giveaway sponsor, Boat Life. And if you could read my lips before, you know I'm saying the exact same thing as I just did. Anyway, tonight's giveaway is sponsored by Boat Life, and we're giving away the Vinyl Life product. There we go. Cleans dirt, grime, and stains. It's solvent-free and abrasive-free. Awesome little product. Boat Life has been around for over 60 years right now, and you can find them at a lot of chandleries and stuff like that, and we really appreciate their support. Tonight, the giveaway, the Vinyl Life, if we use your question, we'll put your name into a little hat, and if we select it at the end of the show, you'll win a free bottle of Vinyl Life. Now, I thought I did this before, but I'll show it again. If you don't win and you want just a bunch of Boat Life products, go to boatlife.com. They got a ton of things on their website. If you go there, you can use SPIN8 as the discount code. You get 25% off. That's a pretty generous deal, if you ask me. So check it out. Give them a call, or rather, check out their website and buy some Boat Life products because they support us. So, without further ado, we've got a little bit of a surprise for you today. And that is we are going to be talking about Snakehead, which is a pretty popular topic these days. But you'll notice that this isn't live with Lenny. It's just Fish Talk Live. Well, we've got a very special guest. As you might have guessed, Lenny's out fishing. So he's not here. And the person in this picture right here carrying that snakehead is our very own, one and only, you've heard him before, the man, the myth, the legend, Zach Titmars. What's up, Zach?
Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Chris?
If you don't know, Zach is the guy that probably answers most of your questions on our Facebook page, and also answers a lot of your emails. And when he's done not doing that, he actually puts Fish Talk magazine together on top of all the other magazines. So he plays a pretty integral role. But not only that, you're like the in-house co-angler in chief, or whatever.
Assistant angler in chief?
Assistant
angler? That works. Yeah, that's good.
But Zach, you also write the kayak articles.
Occasionally, yep. We have a lot of contributors for that, but sort of started that one off a few years ago, and a ton of great writers for that.
Yeah. So. Well, Zach, welcome to the program. We're going to talk about snakeheads. I know it's one of your favorite subjects.
Yeah, snakeheads. I mean, come on. It's.
I hear they're pretty tasty.
Everyone I've fed a snakehead to has been just fell in love with the fish. I've A/B tested with other fish, flounder, rockfish, white perch, and just pick your favorite. 100% of the time, they say snakehead. So.
Well, I say we get to it. Just one of the first comments that I see, though, Dave Sikorsky has just said, let's be honest, Zach taught Lenny all he knows about fishing. So just saying, everyone's rooting for you here.
Well, couple years ago, Tim Campbell told me that he counts every species of fish that he caught. A few years later, we started, and Tim actually has had over hundreds of species on his species log. Now, Lenny also has hundreds of species, but we started FishTalk. I had one edge over Lenny Rudo, and that was that he had not, or I had caught a snakehead before Lenny did. That's the only species of fish I've caught before Lenny. That's it. That's all I got. So if I'm going to fill in for live with Lenny, let's do the one thing that I got a few years head start on.
All right. Very cool.
All right, Chris. So everyone kind of knows the history. So why don't you bring up slide 1? It's the U.S. Geological Survey of registered snakehead catches. And this goes back all the way to 2002 when the first snakehead was discovered in a pond in Crofton, right off Route 3. Now it's behind a restaurant. Some people speculate someone in the restaurant released the fish because they didn't use it for a meal. Some other people think that it could have been an aquarium pet, and they outgrew their tank and they didn't have the heart to kill the fish and released it there. Incidentally, that pond was treated with chemicals and basically wiped out everything in existence. I've actually frequented it in a few years, recently, a few years ago, and there's really not much. There's life in there, but little bluegills, little bass, maybe. Not much to speak of. I could be wrong about that. I didn't spend a ton of time there, but not a whole signs of life. On a heavy rain, that pond was connected, or is connected to the Patuxent River. And it's easy to kind of see that, those fish could easily, they can move across land as long as the fish are wet. They can survive. They do have a primitive lung. So they can sort of slither their way across muddy, marshy surfaces. They only need a couple inches of water, really, to keep their skin wet. So the Patuxent River is also a known spot you can see there just under the G in Washington. That's the headwaters of the Patuxent. And, got a lot of guys keep it quiet because the Patuxent's a pretty narrow river. You can throw a rock across it up in those upper reaches. But those snakes have been caught all the way up to Savage Mill and Laurel. And I'm not trying to blow anyone's spots up, and I'm not here to do that because obviously they're everywhere. We're not going to, they're everywhere. So we'll talk about it a little bit later. But really, it was around 2004, 2 years after the first discovery, when they really became sort of established on the Potomac River. And guys, all the bass fishermen, all the tournament guys were just catching snakeheads every time they're going out. Mattawoman Creek became like one of the epicenters over on the other side, Occoquan. Other places farther south like Potomac Creek and Rappahannock in recent years. They're really just everywhere. So at the time I was, employed Prop Talk magazine, and we did fishing reports, and, I fished my whole life, and I just kind of became obsessed with catching a snakehead. So I just started hitting all those Potomac spots, everything I could research. I read Joe Bruce's books. They were really helpful. I learned a lot about, I'll show you later, some of the lures I use are still those lures that I learned about in Joe Bruce's books, and they're still my favorite. So I owe a lot of credit to him. He was one of the pioneers in sort of tactics on catching snakeheads, and I like to give him credit where credit's due. I should also mention some of the other people that I gathered information from. John Hostaka wrote a fantastic blog about targeting spawning snakeheads and fry balls, and that was on the Delmarva Pow Sports website. The guys over at Blackwater's Edge, ton of information they're putting out. They're doing a podcast. I think you can see CCA Dave on one recently or coming up. I can't recall. Anyway, so Mallows Bay is where I started really kind of, it's a great place. It's now a national historical park. It's the largest ship graveyard in North America. It's a bunch of World War I ships that didn't get finished by World War I, and they're concrete and wood steel ships. And by the time World War II came around, the U-boats and everything, those ships were basically obsolete. So they torched them, scrapped them, and there's this huge ship graveyard there. It's now a national sanctuary. It's a fantastic place to visit. Take kids. If you don't have kayaks, there's a company out of Indian Head that you can take tours with. It's just a really beautiful place. You'll see all kinds of wildlife. But even better, it is just a rich ecosystem, and there's everything from striped bass to white perch, yellow perch, bluegill, catfish, carp, gar, and it's a snakehead hotspot. That's where I caught my first couple snakeheads, including the one you're seeing there in that picture. it took a few trips, to be honest, because these spots were kind of sort of very public, So the first time I went, I talked to a guy who just caught one. He just caught one, actually caught on a rattle trap. But I think it was my second or third trip until I finally actually caught one. And as you can see, it was at the end of the day. I was pretty excited. It was pretty cool. So anyway, there were some early reports on the West and Road River on the eastern. That's just a few tributaries up from the Patuxent on the western side. But overall, it was pretty quiet over on the western side of the Chesapeake. My friend's dad actually was the first reported snakehead catch on the South River, and that was in 2016 on Almshouse Creek. And he actually pulled one out of his crab pot. And over the kind of like the years, you kind of hear watermen pulling them out of crab pots out in deep water at the mouth of these rivers. But, a lot of people weren't catching them. I grew up on Beards Creek, and my dad still has a boat there. He pickerel fishes and perch fishes all year long, and he still hasn't pulled one out. But I've heard that that's a popular spot. The headwaters of the South River looks very fishy, but it's not a lot of access up there. But what I'm getting at is, I showed you the USGS map, and a lot of people aren't reporting to that anymore because, that's been going on for nearly 20 years. And presently, all these Western Shore rivers, they're just becoming, so they're the new hotspots. We published this chart right here 2 years ago. We did it in a partnership with Fish and Hunt Maryland. These were our top 3 snakehead hotspots. The Potomac Creeks, obviously, since 2004, have been where it's at. They're still there. The bow fishermen kind of really, put a hurting on the population, which, there's still a large diversity of species down there. Like I mentioned at Mallows Bay, I've seen a ton of catfish, gar, and bass. I've had days on Madeline Creek where I've never caught a snakehead, but we've caught, other species, which is great. So there is still some biodiversity there. Susquehanna River, they're now stacked up under the Conowingo Dam. They're finding them above the fish ladder, which means they're making their way up to Pennsylvania. I know people up in Philadelphia that catch them all over the place. Blackwater, we could talk about Blackwater all day long. That is just the ideal ecosystem for them. They're everywhere. They're everywhere over there. And we'll get to that a little bit. But I wanted to talk a little about the Western Shore rivers. I actually spotted one on the Chris, I didn't give you a slide for that, but I actually made a slide. I actually spotted one a few nights ago on the Severn River. I went, just doing some recon because I have a few friends that have been pulling them out while perch fishing. And there's only a few water access spots on the Severn, but I actually spotted one, and it was swirling in the shallows of about less than a foot of water. I dropped my lure on its head about 20 times and spooked it. I even foul hooked it one time. It would not attack my lure. When the fish are swirling in the shallows like that, it pretty much means they're spawning. So that pretty much means there's going to be a lot more snakeheads on the Severn River. Like I said, guys like Charles Lawrence and John Vale. John Vale is a contributor to FishTalk as well. You can read some of his Paddle Edge kayak features in our magazine. They're catching them nonstop. They're catching them on the Magatee. I saw a report of Rock Creek off the Patapsco, and like I said, the Conowingo Dam. So I saw actually someone asked a question about where they can catch snakes without going to Southern Maryland. Anywhere. I've personally caught snakes in Charles County at Mallows Bay, Dorchester County at Blackwater, as well as Vienna area. And actually last year I caught my first Baltimore County snakehead, and that was actually below the Loch Raven Dam. So they're pretty much everywhere. And that's actually the Gunpowder River. I've heard myths and rumors that people may have dropped them into the reservoir, which is just awful. I think, no one wants to admit it, but I think a large part of their vast distribution is because people don't want to drive so far. And they may be dropping them where they didn't catch them. So anyway, the Maryland state record and Virginia record are both about 19 pounds. The only difference there is that the Maryland record was actually bow fishing. Maryland DNR does not have, for invasive species, there's no hook and line requirement for a state record. So the state record from Maryland is actually called bow fishing. The Virginia state record was put on hook and line, and that was an IGFA record. Now, what you're looking at is there. This was last week, and that's from Apex Predators down at Potomac Creek on the lower Potomac on the western side. These guys catch a ton of snakehead. If you're looking for a guided trip, highly recommend these guys. They send us a ton of pictures. We know they can catch fish. They're not catching snakeheads. They're catching crappie in the wintertime. Definitely a good crew here. If you want to find out more about them, go to fishtalkmag.com, click on the top banner menu, and click to the charter page, and you'll find a link to their website. Anyway, Apex Predators, these guys know what's up. Anyway, let's move on to any questions, Chris? Anything we're not hitting, or
Let's hold on one second.
I see a few there, but
a lot of them are asking for sound on my part. So Dan wants to know about the Wye River.
Honestly, I don't have any information about the Wye. It seems to be similar salt content than the other rivers. So if they're not there yet, they're going to be. I personally haven't caught one on the Wye yet, so I can't. If I don't know the answer to something, I'm going to tell you I'm not 100% sure on that. And I actually stole that from Lenny because that's his MO as well. So. Chris, I see a question from Jason there. I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Jason Kwan asked if there's anywhere other than Blackwater that has access from land. Yes, I'm not sure where you're at, but over there's some spots over that way. The shoreline gets pretty packed. So off the Chickamauga, there's some spots. I believe there's some spots off the Nanticoke as well, but really not too many. Like I said, if you go up to I just below Loch Raven, I caught snakeheads below that, and the Gunpowder. There's plenty of areas on the Gunpowder. Plenty of areas on the Patuxent for bank fishing. It's tough to find those spots, so you really got to do your homework and get out there and explore for some of that. Most people won't just hand them over, but if you PM me, I could probably give you a few pointers of places I've been. But typically, the kayak is the way to go. It gets you up into these upper reaches of these areas in the super shallow water where boats normally can't go. So
cool. And Roger's got the question here about the impact that we've seen on the bay.
I haven't actually heard any specific impact on crabs or rockfish yet, but like I said, the watermen revealed they were catching a lot of them in their crab pots at the mouths of the rivers, which, a couple years ago, you guys remember all that rain. It was the lowest salinity we had in years, and that was probably a big catalyst in the migration of all these snakeheads to all these tributaries. They were able to move freely. The blue cats, also kind of more of a fresh tolerant fish. They obviously are more salt tolerant. You're seeing them all over the place. So the impact on crabs and rock. Now, this was a big elephant in the room that no one was talking about. I actually mentioned to Lenny, and Lenny said, wow, no one actually mentioned that. So a few minutes ago, I told you they were catching dozens and dozens of snakeheads at the Conowingo. Conowingo is Susquehanna River. That feeds the Susquehanna Flats. That's basically one of the biggest striped bass breeding grounds in the Chesapeake Bay. Why isn't anyone talking about this? They're finding snakeheads at the wharf at Havergrace. I think 100%, in my opinion, snakeheads are going to have an impact on juvenile striped bass spawns because of where they're located. So, yes, I do think they are. However, it's the DNR fishery biologists do say the blue cats are having a much greater effect. But, since you mentioned the effect on snakeheads, the guys over Blackwater have mentioned that they're watermen, they're really involved. They've seen a drastic difference in the biodiversity over there. And personally, I had a day 2 years ago where I caught a couple snakeheads, a couple largemouth. I think I caught a perch and a rockfish. We were over Blackwater. My last trip over there was about a month ago. Caught snakeheads, 2 bass. We caught a lot of snakeheads. A lot of snakeheads.
Well, James wants to know how you catch them.
Good question. That's the next topic on our topic. So pretty much, like I said, Joe Bruce was kind of like, I read his two how to fish for snakehead books. I found them to be, very informative. Obviously, the guys in Florida were catching snakeheads long before, so they're fishing these canals. They're using topwater. This is this is the exact lure that I caught my first snakehead on. It's a booyah frog, hollow body. It's good and nice and weedless. Well, not that one, but you can leave that up. I'll get to that. You can throw it in heavy cover. It doesn't snag anything, unless there's some slime or something. But, top water is great. These, like stuff like a little mouse also. Same thing, same kind of concept, great lure. All this top water stuff, they're coming out with these scooped popping frogs, and that gives a nice, wake. Really, like, you want to create a lot of commotion if you're doing top water. You want to attract that fish. You want to cast it towards structure. The phrase everyone says is a snakehead likes a roof over his head. I think Joe might have coined that in his first book. Some of these guys, this is sort of like a top water combination. It's a lunker hunt. It's a combination between a top water frog. It's sort of a whopper plopper. You get sort of that like a torpedo action on the surface, and then they even make some of these with the frog double. So it's definitely like more of a whopper plopper. This one actually has a stinger hook, which helps with short strikes, but it reduces your weedless capability when you do that. So definitely, if you got really thick cover, makes it more challenging. Blackwater is unique. So I used a lot of those topwater weedless stuff over on the Potomac. There's tons of hydrilla, tons of spatter rock. It gets so thick, your paddle, you pick it up, it looks like you got a mop. It's just really thick. Blackwater is a little different. It's not quite as thick. It's a different type of vegetation over there. There's a lot more open, shallow water, and I think that's why they're really proliferating over there. So my personal best is that one on the right there. That's actually one of the megafrogs, hard body frogs. It also has sort of a scooped mouth, so it pushes a lot of water. Definitely attracts them in. Spinners. You can see there Lenny's fish was caught on a super rooster. They love spinner baits, Spinner baits is a top choice, when you're fishing for snakeheads, sort of, it's the if it ain't white, it ain't right. I don't know. Chartreuse works. A little bit of accents is good, but definitely white is always a good choice. This is sort of an inline spinner bait. It's combined with a soft plastic. This is made by Addiction Baits. I got this at Anglers. Actually, I just popped off the spinner, but I'll get that back in. So this is actually a great lure because it combines, sort of the finesse of a soft plastic. It's got a weedless hook. Let me flip that upside down for you. You don't snag too much on it, but it actually gives you a nice attractant, churning that water, creating some turbulence, attracting the snakehead. Now, actually, this is the just it's a basic Zoom 5-inch white pearl paddle tail, and this is the one that Joe Bruce identified as his favorite lure in his book, and that was nearly 10 years ago when I read that, and it's still my favorite lure. I caught 5 snakeheads on this my last outing. This exact lure. Now, my buddy Mike was using some of his own hand-poured soft plastics, and he was spiking the tail with some orange accent, and he actually outfished all of us that day. But he was using a very similar pattern, but it was actually his own soft plastic design. Mike actually just read an article in FishTalk about optics of chartreuse. If it ain't chartreuse, it ain't no use. And he actually did some optical studies on the electromagnetic spectrum and how light actually is perceived. So check that out in the current issue of FishTalk, and look for some more stuff from Mike in the future. Really cool stuff, science of fishing kind of stuff. Paddle tails are great, but these are even more of a finesse type lure. This is actually a fluke. It's almost like a little, you actually kind of twitch it in the water. These work great. These work great as a trailer for, like chatter baits, which also create a lot of noise and turbulence. This one has actually got a frog. This is also a zoom, and you actually get like a double paddle tail on that. So these, all work great. I'll be perfectly honest and say that when I switched from focusing on top water and went more to a subsurface, my hookup ratio went up. My catch ratio went way up. I caught way more fish, and I'm not the best. I'll be the first to say I'm not the best snakehead fisherman out there. There's some guys that are pulling dozens of fish on every outing. A good day for me is like, I would say 4 or 5 is a good day. My last outing, I got 6, but I'll tell you, between like 5 of us, we caught 19 snakeheads that day in a few short hours. So I don't know. As far as tackle goes, I use a medium heavy rod. I use Power Pro braid. I use 20/20, and I tie it together with a Crazy Alberto. It's a modified version of an Albright knot. It gets it slides through your eyelets real good. It's real nice. I like the Fluoro 20. It's easy on your hand. If you ever grab wet braid, it slices through your hand like butter, and you don't want that. So you need, 2 to 3 feet of a nice thick fluoro. It's invisible in the water virtually. And I actually use these little speed clips. I think these are actually from Big Okie. I've used ones from Tactical Angler, laser eye clips. They're all great. And subsurface not as good, but top water, when you're pulling the lure through the water, it's often out of the water. You want to keep the line up at an angle out of the water. So it doesn't really matter that it's there. But you can really switch lures out super fast using those little clips. A loop knot's good. You can actually tie a bowline. If you know how to tie a bowline, that actually is a great loop knot to use as well. So we talked a little bit about eating snakeheads. Someone asked how they taste. Let's actually. Oh, that's my sister. Hello, Jessica.
What makes them so tasty?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, it's a white flaky firm meat. It does really well if you grill it. It does really well if you bake it. It does really well if you fry it. You can't cook it wrong. My favorite way to do it is just over tacos with some purple slaw and some cilantro and lime juice and avocado. That's my favorite way to do it. I also like it fried with some buffalo sauce. That's pretty good too. Kind of tastes like chicken. Makes you think, my wife's a vegetarian, so makes she doesn't eat wings, so it's kind of the closest thing to get for that. This year, I think I caught about 10, but I've only made a few trips, a couple recon trips. My friend Eric Packard, actually, Chris, that's slide 8. Eric Packard, actually, I asked him the other day. He has caught 27 snakeheads this year. Oh, that's it. Let's talk about that one, actually. That's the big question, and people still ask this. It's been 18 years. When the DNR first learned of these snakeheads, if you caught one, you take it in, and they would give you like a $200 something crazy for Bass Pro Shops. Like you'd get a gift card, and then they were like, "Oh wow, there's a lot of snakeheads. We can't know." It would be like $100. It went down to 50, and then it's like, "All right, thanks for telling us." But it was like, I don't know what they think that's going to do. It wasn't going to eradicate it, but it was a nice bonus for people who got snakehead in the beginning. People still ask, well, "Don't you have to kill snakeheads? Don't you have to kill them?" I'm pretty sure you have to kill them. I'm pretty sure that no one could tell you have to kill anything. I mean, come on, amendment rights, religious beliefs, thou shalt not kill. Come on. It's pretty simple. You don't have to kill anything. No law can tell you have to kill anything. But what's important is you cannot transport a live snakehead. You must release it immediately when you caught it. If you want to keep it, you do have to kill it. That is true, but you don't have to kill it. You have to kill it or you have to release it immediately. That's the law. Anyway, and here's why. Because I'd say about 30 to 40% of snakeheads I've caught are loaded with eggs. Look how that was like a 16-inch snakehead. There was 2 egg sacs that look like that. They spawn multiple times a year, 2 to 3, some say. That's a lot of offspring. It's pretty crazy. So that's why you can't release them. I mean, into other bodies of water. They're prolific fish. They're survivors. I will be perfectly honest. You could probably pull the nasty pic off the screen now. I've unintentionally, I have released snakeheads because it's my prerogative. I have done it to just, I can do this. I'm allowed to do this. I actually didn't feel like cleaning fish. It was getting late. I released 2 that day. I've released 3 snakeheads unintentionally. 3. The first time I was in a sit-in kayak. It's not an ideal fishing platform, so I had a small net, and it literally jumped out of my net. The second time was also a net malfunction. It kind of did sort of like its alligator death roll in my net, and the net kind of went flat because the hook got all hooked up. And then he kind of jumped out of the net into my kayak, and then they were super slimy, and then he just slithered out of my boat. It was crazy. The third one was the most recent one, and it was the most notable. So to dispatch the snakeheads when you're in a kayak, like I said, kayaks are one of the most advantageous platforms to fish for these things because of your ability to get into skinny water and really dive deep into their habitat away from a lot of the bank fishermen and stuff. The easiest thing to do, and it's kind of gruesome, but is actually to remove the gill arches, and that's best with a pair of pliers or a pair of sharp scissors. So that's what I do. It's a little bloody, but you just you got them on your gripper, and you just sort of rinse it off, and then you put it in the cooler. So I did that. Snipped its gills out. Mentioned earlier in this talk that they also have a primitive lung that allows them to breathe on land. I removed the snakehead's gills, put him in my cooler. A few minutes later, opened my cooler, and it shot out like a jack-in-the-box and swam off. It didn't have gills. I removed the fish's gills, and it swam away. These fish are prolific. They are survivors. They're here to stay, and that's just the fact of the matter. So it's the most heart-pumping experience you can get freshwater fishing in Maryland. I mean, maybe a muskie might rival that, a big 35-inch muskie.
I was going to say, Cynthia, you touched on this earlier, and I didn't know if you wanted to kind of visit a little bit more, but she talks about how the blue catfish are more of a threat than the snakefish.
Sure. We talked about it a little bit. The big differences there are that the blue catfish were actually introduced by the fisheries. I think it's the James River, and I think that was the 70s or so. I wasn't around back then, but I had to do some research, so don't take me on that. But and they've spread on their own, but it took a lot longer. The big impact they have is the average size of. I mean, they can get up to 100 pounds. On the Potomac, there's 50-pounders everywhere. They eat everything, so it's a little bit bigger threat to the salt and brackish waters of the Chesapeake Bay, whereas the snakeheads are a bigger threat to the more fresher areas, to panfish, crappie, perch, and spawning areas of the rockfish. So I think that's the big difference between the impact. They're both, everything in the Chesapeake Bay is cyclical. Largemouth bass were introduced to the Potomac River in the late 1800s. A lot of people don't know that.
Wow. I know you wanted to talk about this pick with Eric.
Yeah, so that's Eric. I mentioned Eric caught 27 snakeheads so far this year. I asked him that. He didn't even flinch. Oh, yeah, 27. Yeah, so Eric lives in Southern Maryland, and I think he's in the Spin Sheet Century Club, which means you go boating minimum of 100 days a year, and it's a great challenge for anyone who likes to get out on the water. Eric's a 2-timer, I think, so far. But he fishes way more than that. He fishes like 200 days a year. So he does a lot of bank fishing. He does a lot of wade fishing in addition to kayaking and boat fishing. And he catches thousands of fish. But he loves fishing for snakeheads. We were fishing on that recent trip together I mentioned. And he's discovered a lot of spots in Southern Maryland that I didn't even know. And he's actually introduced us to a few. So, I mean, they're really just everywhere. But I guess what I wanted to talk about a little bit with Eric is in one of his recent articles, he talks about how to wrangle a snakehead. The article talks a little bit about the ferocity that I explained of a fish just jumping out of a cooler. Eric ended up with those 2 hooks, just like these, in his thumb. Something like that, that's pretty painful. So Eric wrote a great article just like how crazy. I mean, the fight begins once it gets in the kayak. I mean, it's like you know, it's just a different animal. Most fish you catch, you get in the kayak, it's just like, oh no, you got me. I'm just gonna kind of lay here and hope you let me go. No, the snakehead is just a completely different animal. It's an escape artist. I think they should call it the Houdini fish, just because its ability to escape. Um, But anyway, that's a great article. It's on fishtalkmag.com. Look for more articles from Eric Packard for our Paddler's Edge kayak fishing features. So, any questions, Chris? I'm about down my talking points there.
All right. I don't know. It's kind of a gruesome. Going back to the gruesome side.
Have you tried an ice pick to the brain to dispatch a snakehead? I've used this approach with large lobster fish. Actually, just had hey, Kevin, how are you, by the way? Hey, thanks for tuning in. I had a discussion with someone about how that would be a good option. So the issue with that is their skull is incredibly thick. It's a really hard head. It would require a tremendous amount of force to get it in the right spot. Maybe if you came in from the sort of where the gills are, it might be a little bit easier. But if you're in a kayak, I mean, you're liable to pop a hole in your kayak, and then I don't know if they're a little expensive these days. You might want to do that. So I find the gill arch removal method to be a little bit more accommodating on a kayak. If you're on land, honestly, like I said, the guys over at Blackwater kind of came up with this sort of hatchet device that sort of just severs the head, severs the spinal cord. I know it's gruesome, but you have to dispatch the fish if you want to keep it. So that's what you got to do. But actually, I think the ice pick would probably work, but I wouldn't really want to do it in the kayak.
Cool. I'm just looking across. Someone was asking about the Lower Potomac. I can't find it here, I'm sorry, the Lower Patapsco. I know you say they're found everywhere, but
yeah, just the other day, Rock Creek, Patapsco. That was like yesterday. I saw a report on one of the fishing forums. So, yeah.
Is that, are you these guys that use bow to go bow fishing? Is that something you've tried before, or is on your bucket list?
It's on my list of things to try. It's just it's definitely a different manner of fishing. I don't know if you call it fishing. It seems like a little bit more of a hunting, but I definitely want to try it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been on my list. It just haven't got around to it yet. My buddy just got a John boat. Maybe he's listening and gets my hint that we should go bow fishing on his new John boat.
There we go.
Yeah. So I didn't mention one thing earlier. I think I kind of glazed over it, but I wanted to mention when I was talking about lure selection is that, minnows have at certain times of year have been incredible producers for snakeheads. And I'm talking guys catching snakeheads in the winter months. We had a really mild winter. They were catching them in January, February. They're like pretty much every month of the year when it was mild. On a warm day, if you're looking at 2-3 feet of water, the water temperature will rise high enough that they'll sort of start becoming active. And if you throw a big minnow out there, they're going to eat it. So, but I've had times where, so on the last outing, I did have a half pint of minnows, and I think I got the big boy snakehead destroyers from Anglers in Annapolis, and I caught one that day, 1 out of 6 on minnow, the rest on the trusty white paddle tail. But there's been times where in the summertime, it's just I think lures are king, but in cold water, early season, minnows. So I don't know how that's faring on the Western Shore rivers. It seems I've taken minnows to the Potomac, and I didn't get a single sniff. Actually, I got some gar biting on the minnows, maybe some bass, but snakeheads didn't seem anything to do with
it. Janet wants to know, what's the effect the tide has in sunlight?
That's a really good question. I think the outgoing tide, the ebb tide is probably the best. You find the snakeheads moving up into the marshy shallows, and then the receding tide kind of pulls them out. I've actually heard them in far unreachable areas, sort of on medium tide, and I thought, wow, if I had some waders and a gig, I could probably march up there and probably find a few. But I haven't done that yet. I've thought about doing that. As far as sunlight goes, it seems a little bit of overcast tends to be a little bit more productive. Broad sunlight doesn't always seem. It seems like some cloud cover on a receding tide seems to be the best time for me, most productive.
Cool. And we were just talking about bow fishing, but other charters?
Yes, there are a couple. I'll have to get back to you. I'll research that. I know when we did that Fish and Hunt Maryland article a few years ago, we did find at least 2. I think there may be a new charter boat out of Blackwater. I've seen the pictures on the forum. I can't think of the name of it. It's got a pretty cool sea deck on it. I'll find those out for you. But I know the Apex Predators guys are pretty much hook and line. But yeah, I'll circle back. Check back on the comments later. Shoot us a message. I'll send you some links. I know I have them somewhere.
Well, I don't see any more questions coming up. But if we sign out here and you had a question, put it in the comments, folks. And Zach is really good about responding to all of those things because I can't. Hold on one second. There we go.
Lenny promised everyone who tuned in some tuna that he's going to bring back from the canyons. I guess that's what he is. He's out in the canyons, while we're working hard on FishTalk.
Can you believe that?
So just PM Lenny for some tuna steaks.
Yeah. He's usually good about sharing whatever he brings. So anyway, well, thank you, Zach. Wonderful job.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be a fill-in. Hopefully, provided some good information. I appreciate everyone tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. And just real quick before we go, just a special thank you to Boat Life for sponsoring the giveaway. And James Hunter, you are going to be cleaning vinyl very soon with Vinyl Life. I will ping you a message and ask for your shipping address very shortly. And with that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining in. It was a great crowd. A lot of great questions, too. And tune in next week, Thursday, 5 o'clock. It'll be live with Lenny, I think, unless he springs on Monday morning that he's not going to be there. He's going fishing again. But until then, again, thanks, Zach. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. We'll talk to you later.
Don't miss another cool Fish Talk video. Click below to subscribe.